The elephants were finally exhausted by their wounds. They charged into their own men, mowing them down. Their riders were flung to the ground and trampled to death. More terrified than menacing, the beasts were being driven like cattle from the battlefield. When, mounted on his elephant, Porus, who had been deserted by most of his men, began to shower on the enemy, swarming around him large numbers of javelins, which he had set aside in advance. He wounded many Macedonians at long range, but he was himself the target of weapons from every direction. He had already received 9 wounds, both to the back and to the chest, and suffered severe loss of blood, so that the missiles he was throwing were slipping from his weakened hands rather than being hurled. His elephant, roused to a frenzy, and as yet unwounded, attacked the enemy ranks no less aggressively than before, until its driver caught sight of his king in a barely conscious state, arms dangling and weapons fallen. At that he spurred the beast to flee. Alexander followed, but his horse was weak from taking many wounds, and it toppled forwards, setting the king on the ground rather than throwing him. Changing horses thus slowed down his pursuit. In the meantime, the brother of Taxiles, the Indian king, had been sent by Alexander, and he began to advise Porus not to persevere to the end, but to surrender to the victor. Although Porus' strength was spent and he suffered considerable loss of blood, he started at the sound of this, a voice which he recognized. "I know you," he said, "brother of Taxiles, traitor to his empire and his throne." And he flung at him one javelin, which by chance had not fallen from his hands. It passed straight through his chest to emerge at the back. After this final courageous act, Porus began to flee with greater urgency, but his elephant had received numerous wounds, and it also began to falter. So he stopped running and threw his infantry in the path of the pursuing enemy. And by now Alexander had caught up. He saw Porus's obstinacy and ordered that no mercy be shown to any who resisted. From every direction, missiles were showered on the Indian infantry and on Porus himself, who, finally overwhelmed by them, began to slip from his elephant. The Indian driving it thought he was dismounting, and ordered the animals to come to its knees in the usual way. When the elephant crouched down, the others sank to the ground, as they had been trained too. And it was this that delivered Porus and the other Indians into the hands of the victors. Believing Porus dead, Alexander ordered his body to be stripped. Men quickly gathered to remorse his cuirass and his clothing. But then the elephant began protecting his master, attacking the men, stripping them, and lifting it, and set Porus's body on his back once more. So the beast was subjected to a volley of weapons from every direction, and when he was dispatched, Porus was placed in the chariot. Then Alexander saw him lift his eyes. Moved by pity, not hatred, he said to him, "What folly forced you, knowing as you did the fame of my achievements, to try the fortunes of war, when Taxiles served as an example of my clemency towards those who surrender, an example so close to you?" "Since you ask," replied Porus, "I shall answer you with the frankness your inquiry has granted me. I did not think that there was anyone stronger than I. Though I knew my own strength, I had not yet tasted yours, and now the outcome of the war has shown to you to be even stronger. Even so, being second to you brings me no little satisfaction." Alexander questioned him further, asking his opinion on what his victor should do with him. "What this day tells you to do," said Porus, "the day on which you have discovered how transitory good fortune is." Porus's advice did him more good than pleas would have done. His greatness of spirit was not cowed or broken, even in adversity, and Alexander felt obliged to treat him not only with mercy but with respect.